Naeem Safi, who has joined us from Peshawar. And finally, we will hear from Rachel Harris, who will be talking about the South Bank's work in South Asia and with South Asia. So if I just hand over to Shazia now, then she can get us started.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. Hope you're well. It's great to be here today, and it's really wonderful that British Council have organised this event to talk about the creative arts and Pakistan. It's something that's been really close to my heart most of my life, growing up as a second generation Pakistani. You're always torn between two cultures and always trying to find a way in which you can make your life become one. Something that I managed to do throughout my working life. So just a little bit of background about me is that I've worked in diversity for about 20 years now, but always within the arts, in music, in film, creative marketing projects for brands that want to target women or minorities of any kind, and quite often ethnicity always came into that. And it was about how can we mix these two things together? How can we find ways to collaborate that isn't saying here is the other, and finding ways in which we can actually create together. It began with music, with working with an artist called Nitin Sawhney and others, and we did great work in making the music mainstream and worldwide. And then a short while after that, I spent time in India and decided that I kind of needed to go a bit further and delve a bit deeper. And after 5 years of working in India, in the film industry, and a really different industry, because it's film, it's all of it, it's celebrities, it's another world, but also because it was actually this time working within a different culture. Not just people with different sensibilities or two sensibilities, but actually figuring out how to do business with a completely other culture. And what you realise fast is that you have to take off the head that you have. You can't expect to go in with a British head talking about how things work in Britain, how things should be done, what the rules and regulations are. You have to actually go into that country and figure out what works here and how does it work. And if it doesn't make sense to you, then you make it make sense for yourself. Because if you don't do that, you're never going to get anywhere. You're always going to be seen as the person coming in who knows nothing. One of the biggest lessons I learned, and it was almost wrote a book about it, about how to do business in India, was the first chapter was, I wrote the first chapter, and it was called When Yes Means Yes and When Yes Means No. And I think that was my biggest lesson. So nobody will ever say no to you, and you have to really figure out what's real. And the only way you can figure out what's real is by spending time and understanding people. And that's what collaboration is all about. It's about people, it's about the culture they live in, and it's about how things work. So how does it work here? Why does it work like that? What can be changed and what can't? What's important in the whole scheme of things. And what you'll find is that relationships are the most important thing. Having face-to-face time with people, letting them learn to be able to trust you and vice versa, and actually be inclusive. Not going in saying, this is what we'd like to do, what can you give us? Or saying, come over here and deliver what you know. It's about true collaboration, it's about what we can actually achieve together. I then decided to try and do this in Pakistan. For various reasons, India was no longer going to happen for me, visas being one of them, governments being another. And then just on a trip to Pakistan for a wedding, trying to find an NGO to work with, I was finding it really hard to, via email and websites and phone calls, to get a meeting with anyone. And I was finding it a bit frustrating. So I went to Pakistan, and just by chance was on a scuba diving trip, and the guy that was running the scuba diving trip's wife actually worked for an NGO where they worked with artisans. And this is what I had always wanted to do, is to work with artisans who had amazing heritage, crafts and skills, and find ways in which we could collaborate and produce beautiful things for an international market. So I met with these guys. Everybody was really receptive and really open, which is one of the things that you find when you go to Asia. It's a anything can happen mentality. Of course it can happen, and that's one of the reasons why it's always a yes. That's one of the reasons there's never a no, because there is very much an attitude of yes, why can't it happen? How can we make it happen? Quite often you come back here to this country and you have the complete opposite reaction of like, well, that can never happen. How on earth would that happen? So by spending time immersing myself in a place that I thought was home anyway, and actually discovering a whole new side of things, I found that actually there are amazing, amazing ways we can work together. And the enthusiasm and the entrepreneurship of Pakistan was rubbing off on me in a way that I hadn't expected. I think that you'll find in countries like Pakistan, there are always people are beset with difficulties that we couldn't possibly imagine. But they find the most innovative ways to get through them, to create and to nourish things that you would never think of, things that cost nothing. And it's quite often a joke that, you know, how can you make something happen, how can you make something work? But that kind of thought process is something that we could really benefit from here in this country, that way of thinking. Finding out, you know, what do you want and how can you make it happen with the resources you have. Here we have lots of different resources. We have a wealth of people, knowledge, money, which brings so much, experience with working with other cultures, and just a history of projects that we take around the world. In places like Pakistan, there's a lot of people doing a lot of things, but even within Pakistan, it's not seen and it's not really lauded. So what would be really amazing is to find ways in which we could harness those things. I think with a couple of people here, I was involved in a leadership program last year with Common Purpose, looking at how we as diasporans could actually work with people from Pakistan and Bangladesh and actually find ways in which we could help. And we talked about innovation, we talked about the 2017 and independence and what that means and what we could do. But it's a lot of talk, and unless you're there, you can't make it happen still. My experience then took me to actually create my social enterprise, which is still really quite nascent and I think has a long way to go, but with the help of Mariam and British Council, hopefully it's going to take its next step. And pretty much that was looking at crafts. Because my family are from Karachi, the Sindh is what I know, and I met an amazing collaborator to work with who has been for 15 years working with crafts, with block printing, vegetable dyeing, embroidery, all of those things that we find, you know, spectacularly beautiful. And she was able to introduce me to different villages, different tribes, different techniques. She took me around different places in the Sindh, including Hyderabad and Hala, who are two cities on the list that we have here for creative cities in Pakistan. And I was able to meet people, and I was able to understand why it is that they produce craft, why one tribe is different from another, what they would like to achieve from having met me. You know, what does it mean to them for me coming along and sitting and drinking tea with them and them showing me my work? What is it that they expect from me? And what can we move forward? So the idea for me was to build a centre in Karachi first, because that's what I know, where we can train the ladies how to finish their work for an international market, how we can pair them up with graduates of design school, and those would be design schools in Pakistan, to actually produce, modernise their heritage. There's amazing heritage, and there's actually amazing modern work and modern craft in Pakistan. Fashion and food are the big things in Pakistan. You eat well and you wear well, and you change those things on a very regular basis. If you see what's on the catwalks in Pakistan, you'll see it in London and in Paris and New York the following season, without a doubt. And this is something that people don't know, but there's incredible creativity, and the output is crazy. You know, it's not China-like quite yet, but the output is quite amazing with different styles, different techniques, all of those ways of using embroidery, sequins, embellishments, and the basic block printing like Mariam's wearing today, which this is famed in the Sindh. So the idea for me is to collaborate and produce work that is available for an international market, but on the other side of things, to be able to have a workspace where people can learn, and also a sales space. So not only would they have a shop where they can sell, but also they would learn how to negotiate, what's the value of their work. because that's something that people don't know either. They don't know what the value of a handmade quilt would be. They will have some people who will come from the cities and buy up 5 or 10 pieces, and they'll be happy and they'll wait for the next person to do the same. There is no availability within the country itself to a large extent of those crafts. You can call them handicrafts if you like, but for me it's skilled artisan work, and it's incredibly skilled. The time it takes to make something, and how everything is different. There's no machine process, even in thought. So for me, this is where I see collaboration happening. Within Pakistan, and having spent time there, and within India, I've also seen a lot happening within other disciplines, such as music. Music is something I still work with now. I've seen a lot of young people doing a lot of really amazing things within art schools, but also within innovation and technology. I'm actually working with a young Pakistani pop star now, and we're going to be making him an international pop star. And that'll be the first time that's ever happened. And there's a lot of interest from American companies and from UK companies. So what's happening is that people are starting to see something beyond an image of Pakistan. And for me, this is one of the most important things, is to change the image that people have of Pakistan. It's an incredibly rich and incredibly diverse, an incredibly generous and beautiful country, as are the people. And obviously with what has been happening in terms of terrorism, as it's called, wars, the view of Pakistanis is incredibly negative and has been for a long time. And I think a lot of work needs to be done to actually show other sides of the country. We're all multi-layered. None of us are that one-dimensional, but that's all there is to us. And I think through collaborations, through art in particular, I think that there could be a lot of really, really positive expression and hope for people. There's a lot of work done in education, and I think there's a great way to use education and crafts together. I don't know what else to say now. I did have some notes, but I haven't actually looked at them at all. Okay, yeah, I think just in terms of working together, what I would just like to end with really is just looking at where we place boundaries and how we work with each other, and to just try and be loose with that, and try and not think in your own head, and try and think in the head of someone who you've just met. Be open to it, and I think possibilities will be really, really amazing. Thank you.